Hey, this is the quick get up and running video for your new loom. I have in front of me what you get, some of the basics in your kit. This is your loom. This is the pattern bar that comes with it. Makes plain weave, a little comb, your warp thread, and the tapestry needle. So we're going to warp the loom like this without the pattern bar. I've got my loom taped down with a big wad of tape so it doesn't hop around for this video. This is the head end of the loom with the bend in it where the pattern bar goes, and this is the foot. You're going to take your warp thread and you're going to see that at the end of this loom there's this keeper slot. And so we're going to wind the warp thread around the slot to hold it as we start. So I like to start on the foot end on the right hand side. I'm on the inside of the foot end. I've got that thread pointing up and I'm going to wrap around. And I'm going to wrap around maybe 3 times until it feels pretty sturdy. All right, and then I'm going to turn around and go up to the head end, and I'm going to come up the outside of that first tooth. I'm going to go around it and come down. And then I'm going to come down in that same opening where I was on the inside, but around the outside of that first real tooth, and come up. And then I'm going to go back up to the next tooth and come down. And I'm going to do that again. So as you're doing this, you basically want your threads to be taut, about like this. They don't need to be so tight and they don't need to be loose and baggy, but just a little bouncy like this is good. Okay, so when I get to the last tooth at the top, I'm coming around it and I'm going to bring it down. I'm going to go around that keeper slot a few times. One thing I like to do sometimes, just to make extra sure that this end holds securely, is I just come around and I do just one knot like that. Okay, let's look at your pattern bar. Your pattern bar has 2 ends. There's the end with the word on it and the logo. That tells you what pattern it makes. That's plain. And then there's the end with the numbers, and that tells you what position you're at. The pattern bar to make plain has 2 positions, so it's just 1, 2, 1, 2. So you slide your pattern bar under the warp threads and up against that bump in your frame. You can see that it kind of seats there. You can, if you move back and forth, you can feel that. So that's kind of putting it in position to align with the threads. And then you push it into place. So let's try that again. I've tried to design it so that it's hard to mess up. It's still possible. I mess it up sometimes, but it's not too bad. And if you do push it up there and some of the threads are misaligned, you can kind of pull them around a little bit, you know. All right, so then you have your pattern bar in place. And the plain weave pattern bar makes 2 sheds. That's the opening between the threads, the warp threads. So it makes 1, and a quarter turn makes 2. And there's only 2 different ones. So you can go between them back and forth. You can go forward, you can go back, as long as you're doing 1 and then 2. As you weave your rows, it works. Take a length of yarn and my tapestry needle. Usually I use about an arm's length of yarn. I'm using a little bit shorter today just because we're only going to do a couple rows. And what I like to do is tie a knot so that my yarn is knotted in my needle and that prevents it from pulling out. And then I take my little comb. All right, so we'll start with 1, although you don't have to. And it doesn't matter which side you start from, the right or the left. You pull it through. Now, as you remember when we were looking at the side view, the opening between the threads was wider at the top. Right? It kind of is shaped like a wedge and it's wider up here. So that's where I pass my needle through. So I pass it through and then I turn my pattern bar. And the shed is the widest. That opening between the threads is widest when that bar is flat on top. All right, so I turn it to 2 and I pass it back through. What I do is I get it kind of snug against that outer warp thread, and then I push it down. All right, let's go to the next one. That's one again. Pass it through at the top. And you make a little hill, and then you push it down. And the reason for doing this is that if you don't, as you weave, it slowly starts to get skinny on the sides. It starts to pull in. So that's your plain weave. Now let's try twill. To switch out your heddle bars, you just do the reverse of what you did before. You just pull it back over the bend in the frame. Usually with 2 hands makes it easier. Okay, so now we've got our twill pattern bar. It says twill on the left. It's got the numbers on the right, and you'll see that the numbers go all the way up to 4 on this one. So let's put it in the same way. Put it up to the top. Slide it up. So there's one important thing to know about all the pattern bars except for plain weave. The last warp thread on either side is halfway between the top thread and the bottom thread. That's called a floating selvage, and that's a big loom thing. And I've put it in these pattern bars because when you start doing a little bit fancier things, and you will, it makes it easier. It prevents you from skipping that last thread when you're switching directions, changing colors, and it prevents there from being a missed kind of stitch at the end. The way that you use the floating selvage, the half height warp thread, is the same on every row. You go under it on the way in, you go through the row, and you go over it on the way out. See what I've done there? So let's try that. We are in position 1 of the twill. We make our little hill, and we push it down. We advance it to 2. Can you see the 2? Yeah. We go under the floating selvage on the way in and over it on the way out. We make our little hill, pull it a little tighter, and we pull it down. All right, let's advance it to 3. Under on the way in, over on the way out. And we'll do one more row. Under on the way in, over on the way out. Now, you can see that one thing that's different already about the way the twill pattern bar works from the plain weave is that it's picking up combinations of threads, right? And you can also see what that means for the weave pattern as we build it. It means that you've got a diagonal rib happening here, and that's twill, which is cool. So let me show you one more thing, which is we were going forward, now we're going to go back to 3. Under on the way in, over on the way out. I'm passing it through on the top. Let's go back to 2. Under on the way in, over on the way out. Oh, and look what's happening. The diagonal has switched directions and become a chevron. And that's because you've switched the rotation. So you can keep switching directions as much as you want. You can go this way for a while, then you go back for a little while, then you go back. You can make a big zigzaggy pattern. You could make one sort of triangle chevron motif. That's twill.